They told me to pack my things and move out because my little brother needed the space. So I moved out all right, into the house next door, the one they couldn't afford anymore. You want to know what betrayal feels like? It's not the dramatic screaming match you see in movies. It's not thrown dishes or slammed doors. Real betrayal is quiet. It's sitting at your family's dinner table, listening to your mother casually announce that your bedroom, your sanctuary, your only private space in this suffocating house, is being handed over to your 24-year-old brother like you're some temporary guest who's overstayed their welcome. But let me back up. Let me tell you about the Sunday dinners at the Owens house in Milwaukee. Picture this, a cramped three-bedroom ranch-style home where the walls are so thin you can hear your neighbor's television through the drywall. The kind of house where privacy doesn't exist and personal space is a luxury reserved for the golden child. Every Sunday, without fail, we'd gather around that scratched wooden table that my mother bought at a garage sale 15 years ago. The same table where I'd done my homework as a kid, where I'd eaten countless meals while listening to my parents discuss bills they couldn't pay and dreams they'd given up on. But now, at 28 years old, I was still sitting at that table, still listening to conversations that somehow never included me as anything more than background noise. Ryan would always arrive exactly at noon, bursting through the front door like he owned the place, which, apparently, he did. He'd swagger in with his perfectly styled hair and his designer sneakers that cost more than most people's rent, talking loudly about his latest YouTube milestone or his newest sponsorship deal. 30,000 subscribers, he'd announce, like he'd just discovered the cure for cancer. And my parents? They'd hang on every word, like he was delivering the gospel. Ryan's channel is really taking off, my mother would gush, serving him an extra helping of her homemade lasagna. Did you see his latest video? It got 15,000 views in just 2 days. My father would nod enthusiastically, his chest puffed out with vicarious pride. That's my boy. Always knew he had it in him. Natural entrepreneur, just like his old man. And there I'd sit, invisible, cutting my food into smaller and smaller pieces, chewing slowly, trying to make myself as small as possible while they celebrated Ryan's mediocre success like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the one who'd helped him buy his first recording equipment 2 years ago. I was the one who'd lent him $3,000 when his credit was shot, and no bank would give him a loan. Money he still hadn't paid back, by the way. Money he'd probably forgotten he even owed me. But did they mention that? Did they acknowledge that their daughter had quietly supported their son's dreams when no one else would? Of course not. Because in the Owens family mythology, I was the failure. I was the one who'd thrown away a perfectly good corporate job to become a freelancer. I was the one who was still living at home at 28 like some kind of loser. Never mind that I'd quit that soul-crushing corporate job because it was literally killing me. 60-hour weeks, a boss who treated me like I was disposable, and a salary that barely covered my student loans and basic expenses. Never mind that I'd walked away from that nightmare to build something of my own, something that actually mattered. All they saw was their daughter moving back into her childhood bedroom, and they were embarrassed. The thing about living with family as an adult is that they freeze you in time. They see you as the person you were at 18, not the person you've become. They don't see the late nights I spent building my client base, or the early mornings I woke up to take calls with executives on the West Coast. They didn't see the careful budgeting, the strategic planning, the slow but steady growth of my freelance writing business. All they saw was failure. So when my mother stood up that particular Sunday evening, clearing her throat like she had some grand announcement to make, I should have known something was coming. She had that look, the same look she'd worn when she told me I needed to be more supportive of Ryan's music career, or when she suggested I should consider going back to school to get a real degree. Ryan's turning the guest room into a recording studio, she said, her voice bright and cheerful, like she was announcing a family vacation. And we were thinking he could use your room too, for equipment storage and maybe a second setup for collaborations. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because I was surprised, I'd felt this coming for months, but because of how casually she said it, like my living situation was just another household chore to be reorganized, like I was a piece of furniture that could be moved around at their convenience. My father didn't even look up from his plate. He just nodded like it was already decided, like my opinion didn't matter, like I didn't matter. "We know you'll understand," my mother continued, her tone taking on that patronizing quality that made my skin crawl. "Ryan's at such a crucial point in his career. This could really be his big break. And you're always saying you want to move out anyway, right? This could be the perfect opportunity for you to finally get your own place. Perfect opportunity." As if being kicked out of my childhood home was some kind of gift they were giving me, as if they were doing me a favor by making me homeless so their precious boy could have more space for his hobby. And Ryan? Ryan just sat there, smirking, not even trying to hide his satisfaction. He knew exactly what was happening, and he was loving every second of it. This was his victory lap, his final triumph in a sibling rivalry I hadn't even known we were having. "I'll think about it," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Because that's what I do. I stay calm. I stay controlled. I learned a long time ago that emotional outbursts in the Owens household only gave them more ammunition to use against you later. But inside, I was burning. They wanted me gone? Fine. They thought I was a failure? Perfect. They assumed I couldn't take care of myself? Excellent. Let them keep thinking that. Let them keep underestimating me. Because I'd learned something valuable in my 28 years on this planet. Being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in my room, the room they were so eager to give away, and I looked around at my life, really looked at it. The minimal furniture, the clean desk, the 2 monitors that I used to run my business, the stack of client notebooks filled with project details, payment schedules, and contract negotiations. The evidence of a life they couldn't see because they'd never bothered to look. You want to know what I did for a living? I was a ghostwriter, not the romantic, struggling artist kind you see in movies. I was a professional ghostwriter for business executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who needed content but didn't have the time or skill to create it themselves. I wrote their LinkedIn articles, their industry blog posts, their keynote speeches, and their book manuscripts. I was the invisible voice behind some very visible success stories, and I was good at it, really good. Good enough that I was making 6 figures while my family assumed I was unemployed. Good enough that I had a waiting list of clients who wanted to work with me. Good enough that I could afford to buy a house, if I wanted to. See, that's the thing about being underestimated. People stop paying attention to what you're actually doing. They make assumptions based on what they think they know, and they never bother to check if those assumptions are true. My family saw me working from home and assumed I was struggling. They saw me living in my childhood bedroom and assumed I couldn't afford to leave. They saw my quiet, unassuming lifestyle and assumed I was failing at life. They had no idea that I'd been planning my exit strategy for months. I'd been watching the real estate market in our neighborhood, keeping an eye on properties that might come available. I'd been building my credit, saving money, and researching mortgage options. I'd been preparing for the day when I'd finally have enough, not just financially, but emotionally, to walk away from this toxic dynamic. And then they handed me the perfect reason. The house across the street had been on the market for 3 months. A beautiful craftsman style home with original hardwood floors, a renovated kitchen, and a dedicated office space that would be perfect for my business. The Greenfield family had lived there for 20 years before relocating to Arizona for retirement, and they'd taken care of the place. It was everything I'd ever wanted in a home: spacious, private, and most importantly, mine. I'd driven past it dozens of times, always slowing down to admire the front porch and the mature oak tree in the yard. I'd even walked through it during an open house, pretending to be casually interested while secretly calculating mortgage payments and imagining myself living there. But I'd held back, telling myself I wasn't ready, that I should wait a little longer, save a little more money. But now I was ready, more than ready. I was furious, and fury is an excellent motivator. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Samantha Holt's number. Sam and I had gone to high school together, and she'd become one of the most successful real estate agents in Milwaukee. We'd stayed in touch over the years, mostly through social media, but she'd always told me to call if I ever wanted to buy a house. Well, now I wanted to buy a house. It was almost midnight when I sent her a text. "Hey Sam, are you still representing the Greenfield property on Oak Street? I'd like to make an offer." She responded within minutes. "Leah, yes, it's still available. Are you serious about this? It's a great property, but it's a big step." "Dead serious," I typed back. "Can we talk tomorrow? I want to move fast on this." The next morning, I met Sam at a coffee shop downtown, away from my neighborhood where someone might see us and report back to my family. I didn't want anyone to know what I was planning until it was done. This needed to be a complete surprise, a total shock that would leave them speechless. "You're really buying a house across from your parents?" Sam asked, her eyebrows raised as she reviewed my financial documents. I'd come prepared with tax returns, bank statements, and a pre-approval letter from my bank. "Not buying," I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "Making a point." Sam laughed, but I could see the admiration in her eyes. "I have to say, Leah, your finances look incredible. I had no idea you were doing so well with your writing business. These numbers are impressive." Of course they were impressive. I'd been working my ass off for 2 years, building something meaningful while my family assumed I was wasting my life. I'd been disciplined, strategic, and professional while they treated me like a charity case. I'd been succeeding while they were planning my failure. "How quickly can we close?" I asked. "With your financial situation? Probably 3 weeks if everything goes smoothly. The sellers are motivated. They've already moved to Arizona, and they're carrying 2 mortgages right now." 3 weeks. 3 weeks to completely change my life and flip the script on my family's assumptions. 3 weeks to go from the family disappointment to the daughter who bought a house across the street just to prove a point. "Let's do it," I said. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, inspections, and loan processing. I scheduled everything during business hours when my family was at work, keeping my plans completely secret. I told them I was looking into some options for moving out, which technically wasn't a lie. They assumed I was checking out rental apartments and maybe looking for a roommate situation. They had no idea I was about to become a homeowner. The hardest part was acting normal during those Sunday dinners while my family discussed Ryan's recording studio plans. They'd already started moving furniture around, measuring spaces, and ordering equipment. My mother had even suggested they could convert my old room into Ryan's brand headquarters once I moved out. It'll be so nice to have more space for Ryan's creativity, she'd say, beaming at her golden child. He's got such big plans for the channel. This could really be the breakthrough he needs. And Ryan would nod sagely, like he was some kind of business genius instead of a 24-year-old who'd never held a real job in his life. I'm thinking of maybe doing some collaborations with other musicians. Having two rooms will really open up the possibilities. I'd smile and nod and ask appropriate questions, all while knowing that in just a few days, their perfect plan was going to explode in their faces. Not because I was trying to sabotage Ryan's dreams, but because they'd made the mistake of assuming I was powerless to stop them. They gave me 7 days to figure out my living situation, 7 days to find somewhere else to go so their precious boy could expand his empire. They thought 7 days wasn't enough time for me to find a decent place, that I'd have to settle for some terrible apartment or beg a friend to let me crash on their couch. They thought 7 days would prove their point about how unprepared I was for adult life. They were wrong. On a Tuesday morning, while my parents were at work and Ryan was probably sleeping until noon like always, the moving truck arrived. I'd hired professional movers to pack and transport my belongings, not because I had that much stuff, but because I wanted it done quickly and efficiently. No drama, no emotional scenes, no chance for anyone to talk me out of it. My life fit into surprisingly few boxes: minimalist furniture, clothes, books, and my office equipment. I'd never been one for accumulating possessions, preferring to invest in experiences and my business rather than things. It made moving easier, but it also meant there was less evidence of the life I'd built for myself. Just clean, organized efficiency, the same way I approached everything else. I stood in my empty childhood bedroom one last time, looking at the pale rectangles on the wall where my pictures had hung, the indent in the carpet where my desk had been. This room had been my sanctuary for the past 2 years, the place where I'd rebuilt my life after walking away from corporate hell. But it had never really felt like home. It had always felt temporary, like I was just passing through on my way to something better. Well, now I was moving on to something better. The movers carried my belongings across the street to my new house, my house, while I supervised and signed the final paperwork with Sam. The keys felt heavy in my hand, solid and real and permanent. For the first time in my adult life, I had a space that was completely mine. No shared walls, no family drama, no one else's opinions about how I should live my life. I walked through my new home slowly, taking inventory of everything that was now mine. The hardwood floors that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, the kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, the living room with its original built-in bookshelves and working fireplace, the master bedroom with its walk-in closet and ensuite bathroom, the office space where I could grow my business without worrying about disturbing anyone else. And the best part? The front window that looked directly across the street at my childhood home. Every day, my family would see my house and remember that they'd underestimated me. Every day, they'd be reminded that their assumptions about my life had been completely wrong. I set up my office first because that was the heart of my business and my independence. My monitors, my ergonomic chair, my client files, everything arranged exactly the way I wanted it. I had work to do, deadlines to meet, money to earn. Life went on, even in the middle of personal revolutions. By Thursday, I was fully moved in and settled. My parents still hadn't noticed anything unusual, probably because they were too busy planning Ryan's studio setup to pay attention to what was happening across the street. The moving truck had come and gone during work hours, and I'd been careful to park my car in the garage so they wouldn't notice any changes in my routine. Sunday dinner was going to be interesting. I spent the weekend putting finishing touches on my new home, hanging pictures and organizing my space. I bought groceries for my own kitchen, set up my own utility accounts, and established my new address with all my business contacts. I was officially a homeowner, officially independent, officially free from my family's toxic dynamics. But they didn't know that yet. Sunday arrived, and I showed up for dinner exactly as usual. Same time, same routine, same casual clothes. I didn't want to give away any hints about what had changed. I wanted the revelation to be complete and devastating. My mother had made pot roast, Ryan's favorite. She'd spent the morning cooking and cleaning, preparing for another celebration of her golden child's success. Ryan arrived right on time, full of excitement about his recording studio plans. I ordered the acoustic panels, he announced before he'd even sat down. They should arrive next week, and I found this great deal on a second monitor for the guest room setup. This is going to be incredible. My father smiled proudly. That's my boy, always thinking ahead, always planning for success. My mother bustled around, serving food and hanging on Ryan's every word. We're so proud of you, honey. You're really making your dreams happen. And I sat there, cutting my pot roast into neat little pieces, chewing slowly, saying nothing. Just like always. Just like they expected. The quiet, unremarkable daughter who never had anything interesting to contribute to the conversation. They'd set up the perfect moment for me to make my announcement about finding a new place to live. They were clearly waiting for me to admit defeat, to tell them about whatever substandard living situation I'd managed to scrape together in the past week. They wanted to hear me say that I was struggling, that I needed more time, that maybe we could work out some kind of compromise. They were going to be so disappointed. So, Leah, my mother said with false brightness, have you found somewhere to stay? We're really hoping to get Ryan's equipment moved in by next weekend. This was it. This was the moment I'd been planning for a week, dreaming about for years. The moment when I finally showed them who I really was. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were the closing documents, the deed to my new house, and a few other papers I thought they might find interesting. I placed the folder on the table in front of me, my movements calm and deliberate. Actually, I said, my voice steady and clear, I've already moved. The silence that followed was beautiful. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. My father's eyebrows shot up toward his hairline. Ryan's smug expression faltered for the first time in years. What do you mean, moved? My father asked slowly. I opened the folder and pulled out the deed, sliding it across the table toward them. I mean, I bought a house. I closed on Tuesday. The movers came Wednesday. I'm officially no longer your problem. My mother picked up the deed with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the legal language. I watched her face change as she processed what she was reading. Confusion, disbelief, and then something that might have been fear. This says, this says you bought the Greenfield house, she whispered. That's right, I said, taking a sip of water. The one across the street. You know, the one with the big front windows that face our old house. Great view. Ryan finally found his voice. You bought a house? How did you? What did you? How is that even possible? I smiled at him, the first genuine smile I'd directed his way in months. Well, Ryan, when you have a successful business and good credit and savings, you can do things like buy houses. Maybe you'll understand someday. The barb hit its mark. Ryan's face flushed red, and he opened his mouth to respond, but my father cut him off. Leah, this is ridiculous. You can't afford a house. That place probably costs $350,000, I said calmly. I put down $70,000. My monthly mortgage payment is less than what most people pay for rent in this city. And yes, I can afford it. Quite easily, actually. I reached into the folder again and pulled out my tax returns from the previous year. I debated whether to show them this, but their shock was so satisfying that I decided to go for the kill. I made $130,000 last year, I said, sliding the documents across the table. From my freelance writing business, the business you all assumed was failing because I work from home in comfortable clothes. My mother's face had gone completely white. My father was staring at the tax returns like they were written in a foreign language. And Ryan? Ryan looked like someone had just punched him in the stomach. 130? My father started, then stopped. But we thought, you thought I was a failure, I finished for him. You thought I was a burden. You thought I was some kind of charity case who couldn't take care of herself. You were wrong. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. I could hear the wall clock ticking, the sound of traffic outside, the distant hum of the refrigerator, normal sounds of normal life, while my family processed the fact that everything they'd believed about me was a lie. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice small and uncertain. But why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you say anything about how well you were doing? The question was so absurd, so completely disconnected from reality, that I almost laughed. Why didn't I tell them? Why didn't I share my success with people who'd spent 2 years treating me like a disappointment? When would I have told you? I asked. During the family dinners where you spent the entire time talking about Ryan's YouTube channel? During the conversations where you suggested I go back to school because I clearly wasn't cut out for the real world? When exactly was I supposed to interrupt your assumption that I was failing to mention that I was actually succeeding? Ryan finally spoke up, his voice defensive and angry. Well, you could have, I mean, if you were doing so well, why were you still living here? It was a fair question. I had to give him that. And the answer was complicated, tied up in family loyalty and my own insecurities and a dozen other factors that I wasn't sure I could explain. Because I thought family was supposed to matter, I said simply. I thought that even if I was successful, even if I was independent, I could still be part of this family. I thought maybe if I stayed close, if I was available to help when you needed it, if I was patient and understanding, you'd eventually see me as an equal instead of a burden. I looked around the table at their faces, shocked, confused, and maybe a little ashamed. I was wrong about that too, I continued. You didn't want me here as family. You wanted me here as a cautionary tale, the daughter who threw away her potential, who couldn't figure out how to be a real adult. You needed me to be failing so you could feel better about your own choices. My father started to protest, but I held up my hand. It's fine, I said. I understand now. You needed me to be the family disappointment so Ryan could be the family success story. You needed me to be struggling so his modest achievements would look impressive by comparison. I get it. I really do. The worst part was that I did understand. I'd figured it out over the past few months, watching the family dynamics play out again and again. They weren't just indifferent to my success, they were threatened by it. If I was doing well, if I was successful and independent and happy, then what did that say about their own choices? What did it say about Ryan's dependence on them, or their need to control and manage their adult children's lives? That's not, my mother started, then stopped, because she couldn't finish the sentence, because we all knew it was true. Look, I said, standing up from the table. I didn't buy that house to hurt you or to prove a point. I bought it because I wanted a home of my own, and I finally had the resources to make that happen. The fact that it's across the street is just a happy coincidence. I gathered up my documents and put them back in the folder. My pot roast was getting cold, but I'd lost my appetite anyway. "I'll be right across the street if you need anything," I said. Assuming you want to acknowledge that your daughter actually exists and might have something valuable to contribute to this family. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "Oh, and Ryan, that $3,000 you borrowed 2 years ago, I'm not going to ask for it back. Consider it my housewarming gift to myself, the gift of never having to lend money to family members who don't respect me enough to pay it back." And then I left. I walked out of that cramped little house, across the street, up the steps to my front porch, and through the door of my own home, my home, the place where no one could make me feel small or unwanted or invisible. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my living room, looking out the big front window at my childhood home. The lights were on in the dining room, and I could see my family still sitting around the table, probably trying to process what had just happened. Part of me felt guilty for dropping such a bombshell on them. Part of me felt sad that it had come to this. But mostly I felt free. The next few days were interesting. Word traveled fast in our neighborhood. It always did. Mrs. Peterson, from 2 houses down, made a point of congratulating me on my new home when I was getting my mail. The mailman asked if I was the daughter who'd bought the Greenfield place. The grocery store clerk mentioned that her aunt had heard about a young woman who'd surprised everyone by buying a house. It was amazing how quickly the narrative changed once people knew the truth. Suddenly, I wasn't the Owens daughter who couldn't get her life together. I was the smart young woman who'd built a successful business and bought a beautiful house. I was an inspiration, a local success story, someone who'd made good choices and achieved the American dream. My parents didn't know how to handle the attention. They'd spent months telling people about Ryan's YouTube success and my professional struggles. Now they had to explain how their supposedly failing daughter had managed to buy a house across the street. They tried to downplay it at first, suggesting that I'd gotten some kind of loan assistance or family help. But the truth was too obvious to deny. Ryan's reaction was the most interesting. His social media presence took a hit when people started asking questions about his subscriber numbers and engagement rates. Turns out that having 30,000 subscribers doesn't mean much if most of them are bots or inactive accounts. His sponsorship deals started drying up when companies realized his actual influence was minimal. Meanwhile, my client base continued to grow. Word of mouth in the business community led to more referrals, and my reputation as a reliable, high-quality ghostwriter opened doors I hadn't even known existed. I was busier than ever, more profitable than ever, and happier than I'd been in years. I started hosting monthly networking events in my home office, bringing together other freelancers and small business owners in the Milwaukee area. It became a valuable resource for people who were building their own careers outside the traditional corporate structure. People like me, quiet achievers who were creating their own definitions of success. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd become exactly what my family had always wanted: successful, independent, and respected in my community. But I'd done it my way, on my timeline, according to my values, and I'd done it without their support or approval. 3 months after moving into my new house, I got a knock on my door. It was my mother, holding a casserole dish and looking nervous. "I brought you some of that lasagna you used to like," she said when I opened the door. I was in the neighborhood. She lived across the street. She was always in the neighborhood. I invited her in, and we sat in my living room drinking coffee and making awkward conversation about the weather and local news. Finally, she got to the real reason for her visit. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "We all do. We made assumptions about your life that weren't fair or accurate. We treated you like you were failing when you were actually succeeding. That was wrong of us. It was the apology I'd been waiting for, but it felt hollow somehow. Too little, too late. The damage had been done, the relationship had been broken, and a simple apology couldn't fix years of dismissal and disrespect. I appreciate that, I said carefully, but I need you to understand that this isn't just about the house or the money. This is about how you see me, how you value me as a person. This is about whether you can accept that I might have different priorities and different definitions of success than you do. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I know. I know we have a lot of work to do to rebuild your trust. I just, I hope you'll give us a chance to try. I looked out my front window at the house across the street, the house where I'd grown up feeling invisible and undervalued. Then I looked around my own living room at the space I'd created for myself, the life I'd built through my own hard work and determination. I'm willing to try, I said finally, but things are different now. I'm different now. I'm not the daughter who needs your approval or your permission to live her life. I'm not going to shrink myself to make other people comfortable anymore. She nodded again, and we sat in silence for a while, both of us processing the weight of what had changed between us. The relationship with my family improved slowly over the following months, but it never went back to the way it was before. How could it? Too much had been revealed. Too many assumptions had been shattered. We had to build something new from the ground up, based on honesty and respect rather than convenience and tradition. Ryan and I developed a cautious friendship, built on mutual recognition of each other's strengths rather than competition for parental approval. He eventually found his niche in social media marketing for small businesses, using his understanding of online platforms to help other entrepreneurs grow their presence. It turned out he was better at supporting other people's businesses than building his own brand. My father struggled the most with the new dynamic. He'd always seen himself as the head of the household, the one who made decisions and set priorities for the family. Learning that his daughter had been more financially successful than he was challenged his sense of identity in ways he found difficult to process. But gradually, slowly, we found our way to a new normal. Sunday dinners became less frequent and more casual. When we did get together, the conversations were more balanced, with everyone contributing their own perspectives and experiences. I was no longer the silent family disappointment, and Ryan was no longer the golden child who could do no wrong. I learned something important during that whole experience. Revenge isn't about getting back at people who hurt you. Real revenge is living well despite their attempts to diminish you. Real revenge is proving them wrong not through words or arguments, but through actions and achievements. They told me I was failing, so I built a business. They told me I couldn't take care of myself, so I bought a house. They told me I was wasting my potential, so I created a career that fulfilled me intellectually and financially. The best part wasn't seeing their shocked faces when they realized how wrong they'd been about me. The best part was discovering who I really was when I stopped trying to meet their expectations and started following my own path. Would you have stayed and fought for your place at that family table, demanding recognition and respect? Or would you have walked away and built something new, something entirely your own? I chose to walk away, and I've never regretted it. Because sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing by other people's rules and start making your own. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest gift anyone can give you. It means they're not paying attention to what you're really doing. It means they won't see you coming until it's too late for them to stop you. And when you finally reveal who you really are, successful, capable, stronger than they ever imagined, their shock becomes your victory. not because you destroyed them, but because you built something they never thought you could achieve. That's real power. That's real success. That's real revenge. Living well, living authentically, living on your own terms. And if they can see your success from their front window every single day, well, that's just a bonus.